It's the last Sunday of the month. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving and such. And just be glad you weren't here for the pregame warm up. David and Jim had to endure my chicken jokes.
That was a joke? I wasn't sure. Okay.
Hey, come on. You don't get better than why did the chicken cross the playground? To get to
don't go there. Just
log it on.
But we're not talking chickens today. We're talking about Apollo's twin sister finally getting her shot.
Oh, God,
so to speak. The Artemis. So anyway, good morning, David. Good morning, Jim. And tell us what you think.
I have to think. Wait a minute. When did that start?
Oh man, you didn't get the notice?
Oh, I'll tell you this morning. I log on to Huffington Post, HuffPost, to see if there's any news breaking. I'm waiting to see certain people die, and they disappoint me every day. But Kanye West was the other day was talking about how he offered. He would run for president, and Trump could be his vice president candidate. This did not sit well with Trump. And this morning, HuffPost is reporting that Trump is calling Kanye West a very troubled man and trying to weasel out of having invited a fascist to dinner at Mar-a-Lago. But he was a very fine person, according to Trump. It's just anyway, watching this guy weasel and explain. I'm really enjoying the one part of the news where almost every day another Republican voice saying he's done with Trump, like Chris Christie and some evangelical leaders says he screwed us. He didn't say it in those terms. He used us, right? And so I'm enjoying watching Trump's support crumble away, and it looks like maybe perhaps it's going to be a vicious primary fight on the Republican side, which I can live with that. It's just it'll be. I'll have to buy extra popcorn, but I can deal with it.
Can you say third party?
That is my guess. That is my guess. Is that Trump will, when Trump does not get the Republican nomination, my guess is that he will run as a third party candidate. And in fact, if he isn't already setting up that third party, he's missing a bet.
Right. The thing is, though, and I agree with what you said, but I'm also reminded of the primary season in 2015 when every prominent Republican, every evangelical hated Trump's guts. They thought he was a joke. I enjoy every once in a while. I have to go back and I have to look at some of the things that Ted Cruz said on the record or Lindsey Graham said on the record about Trump back in 2015. And then when Trump was nominated, because at that point, Republicans really had no one to blame for themselves because for the last 20 years, they have become the party of conspiracy theories, the party of talk radio, the party of tabloid TV, and it could that kind of. I mean, how many when Republican voters embrace the absolute. Well, I take it back. Not the absolute dumbest candidate, because Michelle Bachmann was running, but I mean the absolute dregs. I mean this guy is a self-aggrandizing, pompous, bombastic, minimal intellect, dipshit reality TV show. He's not even a human being. He's like a caricature of a human being. If you were writing a character for Veep, for example, for the TV show Veep, and you wrote this guy, the producers would have your ass thrown out of the studio and beaten with bats in the alley behind a building, right? And yet this is the guy that they embraced in 2015. And then you saw every one of those. I mean, I will never forget that sad hangdog beaten with a boot Ted Cruz phone banking for Trump. I never will forget that. And so what I'm afraid of is that if Trump and his band of seditionist, insurrectionist lunatics, the reality TV show goofs that make up the MAGA movement, the bitter, rotten, moldy dregs of the Tea Party, do embrace Trump, and he secures the nomination, that right now, from to every prominent Republican who said, I'm done with Trump, will make that 180 once again, and be right down at Mar-a-Lago fondling this guy's testicles to ingrate themselves with this guy. There's nothing I love better than to see him split the party, though. There's nothing I'd love better than to see Trump split the party and go, like you said, go third party. I don't know how you save what's left of the Republican Party. I don't think you can. I think
the problem with the Republican Party started a long time ago, and because I was looking at my old notes, I'm cleaning out old files. It's like, it's like I save most of what I post online, and I'm looking back about my arguments about why Hillary Clinton will be a great president, right? And said, okay, I don't need to save that, right? But what I'm looking at is all the messages I posted about the Republican clown car, and when you look at who was running, Michelle Bachmann and Ted Cruz and Rick Santorum and
right. Oh yeah.
And you say there's nobody here who you would want to trust with the red button. There's nobody here you want to let near the White House, not even on a tour. And what has happened to Republicans like John McCain, who love the country? Where are those Republicans? John McCain, I didn't like most of what he stood for, but he would have been a competent president. He would have, he would have honored what the Constitution stood for. When did the Republican Party lose its soul? And I would say it was with Ronald Reagan and the radical right, who used Ronald Reagan as a figurehead and brought in their own people like Butts and Watts, who started dismantling the machineries of government.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, you can, and again, and I've written extensively about this, about Lee Atwater's Southern strategy and the shift in the country following the Civil Rights Act and how Reagan, I mean, to this day, you look back, I mean, even I know people on the left who look back at Reagan with some degree of nostalgic fondness. And I can, and given today's environment, I can see that. And I hear people constantly say, well, if Reagan wouldn't be welcome in the Republican Party today. And I don't know about that, because that guy, he was a pretty racist dude. He loved bombing the shit out of people. I know, because I worked for him in the military, and I can't tell you how many goddamn places he sent us and how many people he sent us to bomb. And he was one of those guys that was easily manipulated.
Tell you, Reagan was a disaster in California. And we knew he was a disaster as a governor. When he, under Jimmy Carter, the terrorists only took hostages. But when Reagan took office and upped the level of rhetoric against the terrorists, that's when the killing started.
Right.
That there were no American hostages killed under Jimmy Carter because he was trying to save their lives. Reagan didn't have that same, we've got to save American lives. We're going to bomb the hell out of those terrorists. And guess what? The terrorists escalated their game and started killing people.
Somebody that was in the military
truck into the Beirut barracks of the Marines killed how many? 200 and 300?
257, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was Reagan. That's on Reagan. That is on Reagan.
Well, but he was, those guys that see themselves as, and I was just dealing with somebody this morning like this, and I'm seeing this more and more, and these are people from the left, as a matter of fact, but it's a very similar mindset to Reagan, which are people that have high principles that require other people to make sacrifices. And it's like last night, I had somebody from the far left who was yelling at me online last night on Twitter, platform, uniforms and saying to me, gun violence in America, we've got to do something. What are you willing to do? How far are you willing to go? I'm like, wait a minute, what are you talking about here? I said, well, we've got to do something about these people. We got to do something. What do you mean by something? Are we talking about violence? Are we talking about killing people? Your plan is to kill people to prevent them from killing people. Okay, but why are you yelling at me? Because you have a big audience. You have your comments online. So just so we're clear here, your principles require me to do the killing. Is that what you're saying? I left or right, I have a major problem with people whose sacred principles require other people to make sacrifices. And so, and Reagan was very much like that. Reagan was perfectly willing to sacrifice people like me, those of us in uniform, on the end of the stick, for his sacred Republican principles of that Cold War America, freedom and democracy, and and dropping patriotism on people from the bomb bays of B-52s. And he was perfectly willing for us to do it. And I always remember that, people would always, and I met Reagan. I met him very, and I would be never, it was and we were all lined up like you do. And I remember very distinctly because he stuck out he was shaking hands, and I remember shaking his hand, and it was like a cold chicken foot. It was like this bony claw. It was like cold, and the guy was, the guy had a certain degree of charisma, just like Trump does. He had a certain degree of showmanship. He was an actor, but behind that, when you listen to that guy talk, especially in person, he was an actor. He was reading lines somebody else gave him.
I was just thinking about this week. There are people who can talk the talk so brilliantly that you just get inspired, but they can't walk the walk. Gene Roddenberry was like that. And it's funny, I would listen to Gene do his rants about what a terrible person Reagan was. And while Reagan had Mies, Roddenberry had Maislish, appealing to his worst impulses. And Roddenberry put him in front of an audience, and he was inspiring. And he's like, oh my God, this is so great. But then when it came to actual management, the man was selfish.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Reagan was like in the Oval Office, but I never trusted him.
Yeah, but and again, but that started there was this with Reagan. I mean, remember what the time was like back then. We just spent Jimmy Carter. I love the guy. I mean, he's actually one of those people that, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a member of anybody's religion or their political party. But it sure would be nice if more Christians were like Jimmy Carter, who seems to live up to the ideals of his faith and religion.
I don't think Jimmy Carter was ruthless enough to be a great president.
Right, and I think that's part of the problem is that one of the advocates. I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day in the Navy. You could always tell when you walked on a ship if the XO, the executive officer, the second in command, was an asshole because the ship was squared away. Because that's the XO. Captain can be a nice guy, but it was the executive officer's job to be the hammer. And so if you walked on board a ship and it was dirty and the sailors were not squared away, the uniforms were kind of sloppy, and the ship had a lot of accidents and things like that, you can always tell because the XO is a nice guy.
Yeah.
The XO's job is to be the hammer, and the captain's job is he can be a nice guy if he's got a competent XO.
Now you're making me think of Mr. Roberts, which was the other way around.
Very, very similar, right? And so and you can always tell if the captain was an asshole and the XO was a nice guy because that's disaster in the making, man.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how Jimmy Carter was a nice guy, and he had a lot of nice, and he hired a lot of nice guys, and the world's not a nice place. And so I'm not saying that the leaders of the country have to be assholes, just the opposite. But there's a degree of firmness that needs to happen, and you can't make nice with everybody all the time. On the other hand, you have someone like Reagan who he came across a very nice guy, but everybody around him was an asshole. I mean, the people that he hired are, again, if you trace America and the people that have caused us the greatest degree of grief and pain, Dick Cheney, Paul Wolfowitz, that entire group of people that were responsible for the Iraq War, right? That were busy working George Bush's mouth. You could trace all of those people to Reagan, to Nixon. And the whole time, it's the same goddamn people all along with one failed, disastrous war wrapped in Christian rhetoric over and over for the last 50 goddamn years.
Yep.
And you know, they're the people in the back working the thing. And so a lot of people liked Reagan because he was charismatic and he seemed like a nice guy. But he was an empty shell. He was an actor. He was reading lines. These people were putting in his mouth and taking them up and making it sound good. And you know, and that's how he was. But and again, you can trace exactly what you said. You can trace where we are now to.
Okay, I got a story for you about Reagan. They were making a movie, which you may remember, called The Best Man, based on a play by Gore Vidal.
Sure.
And I think it was Warner Brothers. And they were casting somebody to play the president of the United States. And they said to Jack Warner, how about Reagan for president? And he said, oh, no, Reagan would never be president. He's a sidekick.
It's a side. He's got to act with a monkey. You know?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And it was like, it's a great story because, I mean, I don't remember if Jack Warner was still alive when Reagan was elected, but it's like.
Yeah. Well, again, but
you're right. He was an actor. He gave a great performance as president.
Also, the rest of America was acting along with it. Again, like you say, you can trace a lot of things that happen or that we see today directly to that era because Reagan had a lot of sound bites. He got a lot of applause.
Yes.
There was a lot of empty, easy patriotism. Of course, we still had the Soviet Union, so it was easy to stand in front of a wall and say, you know, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. It made a lot of people, it did. You know, it's inspiring to watch that, but again, it's shallow, empty patriotism. It's like when, you know, kind of an old has-been band at the end of, at the end of kind of their run, they always write a song about the fans, right? Because if you end the concert on that, no matter how crappy the rest of the concert was, if you end the concert with the song that's a tribute to the fans and the roadies, it's you know, it's like, oh no, everybody's all standing with their tears in their eyes. And the shallow, easy, empty patriotism and wave the flag and again, like I said, the reason I brought up Jimmy Carter was because people that are not of our advanced years forget what it was like in the 70s, what they call the Great Malaise and the gas. You know, I laugh now when people say, "Oh, you know what it's like, the gas prices." Oh, the hell you say? You should have been around. It's nothing. You can get gas. All right, there aren't any lines. Sure, you got to pay a little bit more for it, but there's plenty of it. All right. Back then, there wasn't. Unemployment was high. You know, America really felt like it was in decline. You know, yada yada yada. And then Reagan came along, and it was like this
shining city on the hill.
Right. And we were. And the thing was, Reagan spent a lot of time picking fights, and I know because I was out there always fighting for him. He spent a lot of time picking fights with shitty little bullies, all right? Your Manuel Noriega, and Muammar Gaddafi, and all these little crappy third world places where it was easy to take our military, which people forget at that time, things were not so great in the military. Reagan talked about his 600-ship Navy. Well, we were scraping the bottom of the barrel to get to 300, okay? We were putting shit back in a commission that should have been cut up for razor blades 10, 15 years before that. But we're all out there, you know, we're fighting, we're saving democracy, right? Panama, who gives a shit, you know? And again, places like Libya, those kind of things. And Reagan picked fights that he knew he could win, that made Americans feel good about themselves, because people forget how shitty America felt about itself 8-9 years after the end of the Vietnam War.
Well, it was not just Vietnam, it was Nixon. After we lost faith in the president, because it was like Vietnam and Nixon, and we had all those assassinations and riots in the 60s. You're right. The country felt beaten up, and Reagan offered, yay, let's get back to being, the guys who won World War II. Yeah, okay.
Right, exactly. People forget what it was like in 1979, 1980. Forget that it's, it was this, again, I joined the military when I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in this crappy little cow town. And if any of you that went to school with me are watching this, sorry, but it's a crappy little cow town. And the options for people like me at that time were you made cars if there were jobs available, or you milked cows. And I didn't want to do either one of those. So I joined the military. But joining the military in the early 1980s was not popular. There wasn't anybody out there thanking you for your goddamn service in 1980. I can tell you that.
No.
All right. And in fact, they looked at you, they found out you joined the military, man, you got this look like, oh, wow, you must be a real loser. And so people have forgotten how much America's changed. And a lot of that was Reagan, who made people proud of, America. But again, it's a shallow pride. It was the pride of, of waving flags and pounding drums. And behind that rhetoric and that easy patriotism, there wasn't a whole lot. And 600 ship Navy. Well, yeah, but half of it was non-functional. We couldn't crew half it wouldn't go to sea. What you have now is a lot leaner and a lot smaller, but it's a lot more professional, a lot more competent. People forget that there used to be signs in Norfolk that said sailors and dogs keep off the grass. Again, nobody was thanking you for your goddamn service. All right. This was before things like tail hook and all that kind of stuff. Nowadays, and again, but you trace a lineage from those moments to nowadays where patriotism is a yellow magnet on the back of your car. It's who's got the biggest flag, the biggest truck, the biggest gun. Who can say the shittiest thing on Twitter? You can sit on Twitter and you can watch every day this blustering, shallow patriots, the truck nuts of patriotism. The idea of patriotism is how much you hate everybody else in America. We hate LGBT people, we hate brown people, we hate immigrants, we hate people with accents, we hate people from the north, we hate people from the west. It's just this endless stream of this blustering, chest-beating shit, and you can trace all that shit right back to Reagan because that was his entire administration. Makes you feel good, but there's nothing behind it.
Yeah. There's it's Twitter is, because of Elon Musk, Twitter is turning into a right-wing cesspool. And everybody I know who I respect is walking away from Twitter. Is like,
I'm not walking away, so that'll tell you where I stand on the respect scale. But,
or they're running away from it. I never use Twitter that much. I mean,
you were never
on maybe once or twice a month. So I deactivated my account.
Right, I saw that.
But
I have a pretty significant presence, or did. I've lost 20,000 followers, and it has now become a thing where every day I get up and I look, because I never give a shit. I never even knew that I was over 4 million followers until somebody mentioned that. Nowadays, I look at it all the time because every day I get up and I'm like, all right, another 5,000 down. It's like trying to see. It's like a mark of pride. How many I can lose in a day?
There's something else is going to replace Twitter. Twitter has lost credibility. I was driving down to the convention this morning. I'm thinking empires collapse, corporate empires collapse, political empires collapse, global empires collapse, little empires collapse, big ones collapse. No empire lasts forever. Twitter was an empire. Why do empires collapse? They collapse because they are no longer providing the service of stability or security or usefulness. And so the Roman Empire lasted 500 years because it provided political stability in that entire region. They'd put up a garrison and defend the local towns against barbarians. So it's like, yeah, the emperor is good for us. But the minute the emperor stops being, thinking about we must protect the empire, we must protect the usefulness and the security and the stability, the empire collapses. And that's what happened to Twitter.
That's a hell of an analogy, because I mean, my God, there's a guy that's running Twitter right now that's fiddling while the whole goddamn place burns to the ground. I mean, that's a hell of an analogy.
What has been revealed is that Elon Musk was a performance. He's not the businessman he pretends to be any more than Trump was the political expert he pretended to be. These are guys who were living in performance and reputation and presentation, but there was no, all hat and no cattle. The clothes had no emperor. And Musk, apparently, as some people are saying, he's somewhere on the spectrum, and he has only survived as long as he has because he's had handlers. SpaceX, they had to have people who would manage Musk to keep him out of trouble.
Yeah.
And now, with Twitter, there's nobody there who knows how to manage him.
Right. Well, and the other side of it too is, and I mentioned this online, I'm actually surprised they didn't get me kicked off the platform, and which is now also a goal of mine. And people keep asking me when I'm going to leave. I'm not leaving. I'm going to get kicked out. That's how it's going to work. All right. And but the thing is, and one of the things, if you look at Musk, again, I'm no expert on this, but Musk claims that he is on the Asperger's spectrum somewhere on there. And maybe so. I've seen interviews with him where, again, I'm no expert. I'm not a diagnostic. I'm not somebody that can diagnose those kind of things. But on the other hand, one of the things I see is the areas that he's been successful in: SpaceX, Tesla, some of his other, PayPal, those kind of things. The things where again he swooped in, picked up kind of this, prototype technology, and boosted it. Now they're landing spaceships on barges at sea, which is a pretty amazing technological achievement. But Musk was dealing with engineers. So when you go to an engineer and you say, listen, I want to not only take off in a rocket, I want to land like Robert Heinlein used to write about back in the 60s, up and down, right? And that's a hell of a technological achievement all by itself. And then he throws this in. And then we're going to land on a barge at sea. Now, a lot of people don't understand the technical challenges of landing a helicopter on a back end of a cruiser in normal seas is a technological achievement, and people die doing it all the time. All right. We have a dozen helicopter accidents in the Navy every year. And these are people that are highly trained, highly skilled, and have a hell of a lot of help. And there's still accidents. And yet here's Musk landing these rockets. I session where this idea first got floated, and whether it was his idea or somebody else's, I don't know. But when you say that as Elon Musk to a room full of engineers, you don't get laughed out of the room, because that's how engineer brains work. They're like, well, we could do that if we have enough money and you let us crash enough rockets. Eventually, we will be able to do that reliably. And the trick is, of course,
there's a wonderful mini series HBO did many years ago with Tom Hanks called From the Earth to the Moon. And one of the episodes is about how do we physically get to the moon and back? And the breakthrough was, let's throw away the parts of the vehicle that we're done with. And so they ended up with multi-stage, and watching the whole lunar program. Okay, we're done with this. We're done with it. Right. We're leaving this behind on the moon because we don't need it anymore. And it was
you had $25 billion in 1968 money to throw at a moonshot. You can do that, right?
Yeah.
And it's the thing with Musk, and it's the thing with SpaceX. If you crash enough rockets, and you can keep throwing money at it, eventually you're going to succeed, because that's engineering. And it's the same thing with an electric car. But social media is entirely different, because you can crash fucking rockets all day and you're still going down if you don't learn anything. And the biggest thing I see with Musk is every time they crashed a rocket, and this is before Musk went over the edge. This is before the real break for Musk was that moment when those kids were trapped in a cave in Indonesia, And Musk
Right.
offered this little submarine thing, and the rescuers said, we're not interested, and they called them pedophiles. That was where the real break was.
That
But
was that was wrong.
prior to that, Musk would get on Twitter, he'd get on social media, they'd interview him on the news, and they'd say, well, you blew up another rocket. They say, yeah, that's true, but we learned a lot from it.
Yeah.
And that's
yeah.
important. And that's important. That's engineering.
Yes.
Where you don't see that is now. Every time Musk crashes a rocket, to use the metaphor, on Twitter, he doubles down on it. He yells at people online, I know more than you do. That's a Trump statement. That's not, yeah, you're right.
Because he's a very stable genius.
We tried to roll out this blue check mark thing. We didn't make it through. Crash and burn, giant explosion. And we learned absolutely fuck all from it. And we're just going to keep doing it. Because the big explosions are making everybody mad. Ha ha ha. That's a Trump. That's a Trump move. That is a complete 180 break from the guy that was pretending to be an engineer 10 years ago.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the real difference. Yeah.
There was a time when he was really respected to the point that the Big Bang Theory had him do a cameo in one episode.
Kitchen episode, right.
Yeah, and you're thinking, that makes him look good. But now, that episode is an embarrassment.
It's horrifying how bad that episode is. And the part of it, it's so laughable. Here's Elon Musk working in it, washing pots in his kitchen because he's a humble guy. Come on, man. It's horrifying how bad that was. But again, that's pre rescuers or pedophiles break. You know what I'm saying? There's a real departure right in there. His wife left him. There's a real break between the Musk that, again, I say pretending to be an engineer because he's
let
not.
me suggest something because we're drawing parallels between Trump and Musk. The two of them are playing this from the same playbook, I guess. The Republican Party is trying very hard to dump Trump. And whether or not he, declares as a third party candidate, he'll destroy the Republican Party if he does. But what we're seeing is that the party is finally recognizing they can't afford Trump anymore. And it may be that a lot of the companies that Musk is involved in are going to recognize they can't afford to be identified with Musk anymore. It may be that we're seeing the chance of a resurgence of sanity, that we can't afford to have a crazy person in charge of the company because the empires collapse, and we can't. And those of us who are committed to keeping this empire functioning, we can't allow the emperor to be crazy anymore. And
I can see that
it's what happened to Caligula. They're headed toward a Caligula ending.
Right. Well, and I can see that with publicly held companies where he has to make stockholders happy, but Twitter, he owns it. And that's the thing. It's funny because he talks about free speech. In fact, I saw him this morning. He was on Twitter talking about free speech. And yet he is entirely the random, capricious arbiter of what passes for free speech.
Well, you know the old saying, freedom of the press is for the man who owns the press.
Right. And that's exactly right. And so I see that as a metaphor. And in fact, I need to sit down and write an essay on this. And I am about writing. It's a metaphor. Twitter is a metaphor for what's happening in America, or at least a bellwether, an
allegory. It's something, yeah.
Right, because here's a group of people. Musk again. There was a time when Musk, and I said this online and got all kind of shit for it, but and you live there. You live in Southern California, and people in Southern California, because California itself has become it's become a punching bag for right-wing rhetoric, and yet Musk's entire success is based on the technology and the innovation and the people of Southern California. And I looked at that more, and it is California is where people like Elon Musk go to make fortunes, and then Texas is where they go to
California is where the future starts. Let me say,
Right.
we know this is if there's a fad is gonna sweep across America, it's gonna start in California. If a
not
new
just California, but
technology,
Southern California.
it always starts in California and then heads east. Cell phones, flat screen TVs, 3D, whatever. It starts here and works because we have the Silicon Valley, we have Hollywood, we have the television industry. It all because it gets publicized here. People in California experiment with stuff. It gets publicized. It becomes a fad. It sweeps east. We've seen this. We saw this in the 60s.
Right. And this is what I said online. I said, California is where you go to start a business. Texas is where you go so you don't have to pay taxes on it. And the thing about it is, it is. You go to California to create technology, and then you take your fortune and you move to Texas or Florida so you don't have to pay taxes on it. But, and I got a lot of shit for that online. And again, I'm surprised I get banned from Twitter for it. Nobody's starting SpaceX. Nobody's starting a company to colonize Mars in fucking Idaho, okay? And no offense to Idaho, but you're not seeing a lot of television shows about corn farmers in Idaho, okay? Or Nebraska, or again, all the things that we love about America, that we claim to be American, everything from pizza to rockets to the moon, are from big cities like New York, or the technological advances of places like California. It's not just technology, it's cultural, technology, social, all of those things come from these places that are now so utterly reviled by Republican leadership. And it's astounding to me, how much we hate the places that, if you sit down, and I've done this before, you get online and I say, I'm talking to 500,000 people a day, and I say, look, tell me what America is. Tell me what America is. I'm not talking about mountains and lakes and rivers and shit. Tell me what America, when you think of the United States, I don't care if you're left or you're right, what do you think of? You think of pizza and skateboarding and rockets to the moon and the internet and all this stuff. This will go on because America's different for everybody. And that's the first thing I say to these people is America's different, but everything that you name, none of it came from a cornfield in Nebraska. It either came from New York. We have commercials. New York City. We have commercials about how great New York is, and everything else came from California. Back, prior to the Civil War. But again, these are the very things that when people say, this is what I think of in America, in the next breath, these are the places that they hate. Goddamn California, high taxes, high gas. Goddamn people out there don't know what their identity is, blah, blah, blah. Fucking liberals from New York. The same people that they hate are the people that are responsible for everything they love.
Jim?
What?
You know what else is great about America?
What's that?
You know what else is great about America? Artemis.
Oh, yeah. I want to steer us back. And it is. And the reason that Bob wants to steer us back to this is because I told him that's what I wanted to do yesterday when he asked me an email. What I'm talking about today.
Well,
all these things relate.
Jim, let me give you this. Because I was asked in an interview yesterday, and the subject, we're talking about Star Trek or whatever, but I said, look, the 60s, we had riots, we had civil unrest, we had the civil rights movement, we had Vietnam, we had assassinations, we had no reason to be hopeful, but there were only three things in the 60s that gave us optimism. One was the Beatles, one was Star Trek, but the big one was the space program, the Apollo program.
Yeah. Well, and it's true nowadays. And again, it's funny. We go around and stuff. Back in the, like you said, 60s, we were all glued to the TV set watching America land on the moon and accomplish those things. And then later in the 70s, even during all the horrible things of Vietnam War and the malaise of the 70s, you could still look up in the sky and you could see, remember Apollo Soyuz, you could see Russia and America, Soviet Union and America, two countries that absolutely hated each other, political opposites who were cooperating orbit to meet up and shake hands, right?
You know,
And like you
see,
said,
that's the thing, we succeeded with ending the Cold War by creating trade with Russia. And Nixon, I give him credit, he went to China and opened up trade with China, and that reduced the threat of war with China. The way you reduce threat of war is you create some kind of partnership with your enemy. And that was it was called détente. That was the most successful political period in American history in recent years, and we've forgotten that. Now it's, who are we going to build barriers against? Who are we going to build walls against? Who are we going to hate? Who are we going to prepare for war with? And that makes it inevitable.
Right. Well, there's a whole shitload of people that are still in charge of this country that are nostalgic for the Cold War. I know a lot of people in the military that were, I mean, we were on the goddamn edge all the time. You never know if you're going to live through the damn day. We were rattling sailors. We had 3 years, a battleship in the Mediterranean facing the Soviet fleet. I mean, I was right in the middle of all that. And over some pissant country, so some pissant piece of water, the Gulf of Sidroff in Libya, and we damn near went to World War III over that nonsense, over nothing that anybody give a shit about, right?
I remember Kennedy and Nixon debating about Quemoy and Matsu, and Kennedy says those islands are not worth fighting for, and Nixon is saying you got to draw the line somewhere.
Right. Well, and that's how it was. Reagan, I mean, the line of death, the Gulf of Sidra, and it's not, again, I've been there, man. It's nothing. It's nobody gives a shit about it, including Libya. Nobody cares. And you had a bunch of guys standing around with their dicks hanging out, all, in a measuring contest with the fate of the world hanging in the goddamn balance. And then it was only a few years later the Soviet Union collapsed, and there was like this moment where everybody had to breathe a sigh of relief, and the union of whatever the hell it is scientists turned the doomsday clock back 10 minutes, and it was like we'd gotten a second chance. But there were, after that moment of relief, what happened in the decades since is that there are a hell of a lot of people that lived through that era that miss it, because back then there was this big nebulous enemy over there somewhere that we could, you didn't dare say anything because we had to fight him over there. We'd have to fight him over here, right? Remember that rhetoric? If we don't fight him over there, we'll have to fight him over here. The goddamn commies and so there was a hell of a lot of money, and there was a hell of a lot of people that were a hell of a lot important, and there were 600 ship navies and nuclear aircraft carriers, and if you went to Congress and said, hey, we should spend $1 trillion on this goddamn invisible fighter jet, you were drummed out of the place as unpatriotic, because god damn it, we needed that in case those guys want to come over here. And nobody questioned that kind of thing. And there's a hell of a lot of people in industry, and there's a hell of a lot of people in politics that miss that easy enemy. And the world's a hell of a lot more chaotic nowadays. There's less small enemies. It's hard to go and say, listen, man, there's a bunch of goddamn sheep herders in Afghanistan with pointy sticks that are killing our people, so we're going to need a $1.5 trillion fighter jet. And when no American has been killed by enemy air superiority in 50 goddamn years since Vietnam, right? And so it's a hell of a lot harder to get funding for that sort of thing. And there's a lot of people that miss that. It being, the kind of thing, Reagan, Star Wars and laser space. And war's a hell of a lot easier and a hell of a lot more exciting than peace is.
Well, there's also the corporate mindset. Is all that money invested in military research you end up creating new products like cell phones and GPS and whatever. And it's like, so they're all gung-ho on investing in military because they know the research is going to filter down into consumer products, and that's where they'll make their back end.
That's true, but the other side of Cold War era military spending, while you did get that kind of technology out of it, the other side of it is you could spend billions of dollars, and I was part of some of these projects. You could spend billions of dollars and not produce a goddamn thing. Okay, you could you could invest in some you betcha weapon system that was going to change everything, and you could throw money at years, and at the end of it, end up with 2 concept drawings and some computer files, and never have produced a single piece of hardware. And if you ever get a chance, look at the Navy's A-10, X-A-10 experimental aircraft program, because they spent ungodly almost $1 trillion on that goddamn thing over 10 years, and all that ever came out of it.
Well, not all of that money went where it was supposed to. A lot of that stuff is cover programs so that the CIA has funding
and
that
like
doesn't
I said,
show up in the budget.
I was part of a lot of that, and so again, there are many things that I can't talk about, but which sounds a whole lot more exciting than it is. Really, it's not. But again, there was a lot less accountability during the Cold War than there is nowadays. And again, all these things are how we got here. And I look at things like Twitter, and I look at things like Elon Musk, a single billionaire becoming the arbiter of freedom of speech, and not just freedom of speech, but what you see. He'll decide what politicians are able to say what online. I have a column here, in fact, behind the window here where I'm watching the screen. It's my office. There's a couple of big screens on my desk here, and then there's
It's an evil lair. It's an evil overlord lair.
That's right. and that one side of my screen here is a column that I'm keeping an eye on of the critical comments of Elon Musk on Twitter that are being suppressed. I mean, I don't know if he's doing it himself or he's got a team of little suck-ups that are busy, But again, if you're a politician and you say something critical, or you propose legislation, let us say, to regulate social media, the odds of that appearing on Twitter are very low. And increasingly low. So you have a guy that is an arbiter of what passes for freedom on social media. And you have to remember, this is not just limited to America, it's worldwide. But again, this is not a metaphor, but it is a bellwether. It's a canary in a coal mine for larger things, because that's how America is. We have a handful of people.
Good morning, David.
Tremendous power that decide who votes, who gets to speak up, who gets to hold office, who goes to prison for the rest of their lives.
I'm on a Zoom conference. Okay. Hi, Jamie. It's good to see you.
That's right. And we gotta. David said it. For those of you that aren't aware, David said Lost Con. Is that where you're at?
Yeah, Lost Con. Yeah.
The science fiction convention. So I think it's a very popular table to stop by. So if you get a chance to go to Lost Con, stop by and say hi to him, because he's got some cool stuff. And so,
yes.
Anyway, these things, you look around and you see these sort of things where, again, a handful of people have a whole lot of power, and they not only have the power to do obvious things like keep you from posting on social media, they have less power, the ability to manipulate how you think by deciding what kind of information that you see. And again, this takes us back to we hear these words and we ignore what they mean. Those who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And we are rapidly returning to the age of robber barons, where a handful of people own everything in the country, and you have to pay them for the privilege of eating out of their garbage can. And, we talk about things like company towns and company doctors and company housing. You look at how Musk is running Twitter, and you kiss the ring, you click the link on the email, and you commit to working 80 hours a goddamn week for no increase in pay, you're out. This is not a new thing. And, but on the other hand, the other side of this is that it doesn't have to be that way. One of the biggest complaints in America right now is we can't find people to work. Well, that means that the worker is the one with the power. And there's no way that a billionaire, even a guy like Elon Musk, can run a platform like Twitter by himself in his office, all mad and angry and punching buttons. He has to have a staff of engineers. He has to have people that land the rockets, that build the cars, the buttons, that write the code. And it's not just him. It's the people who run Walmart. It's the people who drill for oil. It's the people who decide who gets elected. Right now, all of that power is with us. All you have to do is show up. And the last election shows that, because this is the first time in a long goddamn time that a sitting president hasn't lost all of Congress in the midterm elections. People showed up. Young people showed up. Minorities showed up. Women showed up. People who don't normally vote turned out. And what you should, and it's still only about 60% of the country voted. And what that should tell you is that if the rest of us show up, we can change things without violence, without blowing shit up, without killing each other.
I will tell you, let me share this. And this is, I'm very proud of this. For the longest time, my son did not believe in voting. I mean, he voted, but it's like, I don't trust them, and it doesn't make a difference.
So, you know.
Yeah, but this last election, he sat down and went through the sample ballot, and then he got online and researched every candidate, every judge, every proposition, he went through the entire ballot like you wouldn't believe. And he's coming back with information I didn't have. And I said, okay, from now on, I'm gonna let you do the research. You know, my parents, they used to have proposition parties where people, each person coming to the party would investigate as a different candidate proposition, and they would all get together and report what they knew, and that way they would vote responsibly. My son did that all on his own, and he's 38. Now, if the younger generations, and I hate that term, younger generations, but if those who are just coming of age are taking that kind of interest in politics, this country will be transformed within 3 elections.
Right. And I absolutely agree. And it's great to see that turn out. I will also say this. Those people listen to folks like me, like you, like those of us that are online saying, show up, change things. And they did show up. And it is imperative that those that are currently in power listen to that and make good on those promises. If you want these people,
they have to notice. The Republican Party noticed that there was no red wave, that they didn't win the Senate, that they barely won the House, and they have to notice, what are we doing wrong, and how do we fix it? And so they are definitely addressing it with gerrymandering and voter suppression and vote rigging and judges.
Right. Not how can we get your votes? How can we keep you from voting?
Yeah. But at some point, some of the Republicans are going to say, we need to address the needs of the people if we want them to vote for us. It may not happen for a decade, but at some point, this generation of Republicans is going to die. And the next generation is going to say, we got to try something different.
Right. The only, and that you're absolutely 100% correct. The downside of that is that people are tired of waiting. You know, they say, well, I don't want to have to wait for these old bastards to die off. I want you to fix shit now. I showed up like you told me to. I voted. We held the Senate. We put your ass in office. Now we want to see what you promised us. We want to
see. This is the thing. This is the thing about elections. Nobody gets a pony. What you get is a plow horse, and you keep going. You get a little bit every time. You don't get everything in one election. You get a little bit, you get a little bit, you get a little bit, and you keep working. And the big changes are an opportunity for a big face plant. China learned that with the big 5-year plan. Mao Zedong was, great at leading a revolution, not too good at running a government.
Right. And I absolutely 100% agree with you. On the other hand, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I've written those very words. I don't know how many hundreds, how many goddamn hundreds of essays I've written that said exactly that. You're not going to get a pony. You're not getting a unicorn. On the other hand, it has to be obvious that the politicians that they put in office, the people that we voted for, are listening. They're trying to, at least Look, we appreciate your vote. We're absolutely respectful that you showed up. Thank you so much. And now we are going to work on the things that are important to you. And I talked to you again. My own son. I'm a grandfather this week. I have a new grandson this week, and I talked to my own son, and I talked to that generation and the things that are important to them. And there are things that they're worried about. They're worried about, and there's things that I don't talk about, but exactly. And there are things that I don't talk about because it's somebody else's privacy, and I don't feel with the kind of things that I face online. I don't put those things out there. But there are things that my family went through where these changes in the loss of civil rights, the current trend, especially in places like Florida, to criminalize miscarriage, to criminalize abortion, to criminalize women's rights. Those things are very, very concerning to my son's generation. Things like the environment. We live in a state that will be underwater. And there's no stopping that now. All we can do now is mitigate the damage. And that generation wants to see us mitigating the goddamn damage. Get out there and get it done. And it doesn't matter if it pisses people off. Fuck the oil industry. It's time to do something about it. And so we want to see, that generation wants to see some action. And that's why they showed up. And we're going to need to see that action. I think we are to some extent, but there needs to be one of the rules. And again, I come back to Navy analogies because that's what I know. But one of the things that when you're driving a ship at sea and there's another ship coming, disasters pending, the first rule of the maritime rules of the road of navigation at sea is to make changes early and obvious so the guy on the other side can see what the hell you're doing and make the appropriate changes. And it's the same thing now. We need to make decisive, obvious decisions and actions to signal our intent to the young generation, the people that are coming up, that we hear them and that we are trying to leave them a world better than the one that we had.
I'm almost out of time here because the convention. So let me just say, ditto what you have said. I mean, I could do a great rant, but I'd just be repeating everything you said. We have to make changes, and we have to show that we're making changes. Otherwise, politically, we're headed a dead end. The same way the Soviet Union collapsed. This country is very fragile. We don't like to admit it, but we are fragile. And Trump revealed how fragile we are. And the only way we can protect ourselves and have a future is, as you say, to show up and vote. And I'm heartened by the fact that the up and coming generations, the younger generations, are taking that kind of commitment seriously. They're showing up, and because they recognize, and maybe it's the same thing that we felt in the 60s. The old folks don't know what they're doing. It's time for us to take charge, which is fine with me. If every younger generation has to say it's time for us to take responsibility for the world we want to live in. Great. Because I'll tell you this, I'll be 79 in January. I'm exhausted right now. All I want to do is put my feet up and rest. But I'm still working though. I'm still working because it's fun to work. But man, there are things I don't have the strength and endurance I had when I was 75.
Man, that's the truth. Yeah. And that's the thing though. I mean, I would like to sit back and do nothing but write books with you and turn this over to somebody else. But the other side of it too is the fact that again, and I'm not going to yell like I didn't mention Artemis, but again, you see this thing coming back around. While we look at all these horrible things, the United States built and flew a rocket, Artemis. I grant you that it's based on a lot of the technology from previous generations, and we're not landing on barges at sea. But America itself has built a moon ship and gone back to the moon. It's unmanned at the moment, but this paves the way for future things. I know there's a lot of people out there that say, why the hell are we doing that? We got all these problems here. But as David said earlier, those things lead to improvements right here.
That's right. The money gets spent here on Earth training engineers and scientists and teachers and people in all of the maintenance. And what happens is there is a trickle down. The boom in the economy in the 60s was directly traceable to the money we spent on the Apollo program. Because it built schools and trained teachers and trained engineers and mechanics and service and researchers and scientists and medical people in every field. Every field benefited from the space program, and we're going to do it all over again with Artemis. Artemis
Right,
is just one of the greatest things of our generation now.
and that's exactly right. And the other side of that is beyond the technology. America needs something to inspire it, something that we can all agree on, left and right, something that we can all come together on. We haven't had a challenge or a national goal that we all as Americans could get behind in a long goddamn time. And I think that's a huge part of our problem.
Yeah, the next moon landing is going to take a lot of emotional energy away from all of the craziness and conspiracy theories, because people are going to turn on their high definition television sets and watch in 3D color, whatever,
Live stream,
4K,
live
8K,
stream
whatever.
from the moon.
And we will experience the awe and wonder of moon landing all over again. Except for those who say, "Oh, Kubrick is directing this one too." Kubrick didn't really die.
It's going to have the conspiracy net, but the other side of it too is the fact that again, America needs something to inspire it. It needs something to bring us together.
And lunar program is a great way.
Definitely that. And so, and also again, the thing to remember is that Artemis is our program as Americans, run by us, run by our people, not run by some goddamn billionaire who is doing things for his own end. This is a program that's run by us, and yeah, it could be better, could be a hell of a lot worse, but at least America, and not just America, but those of us who give a shit about the future, we can look up in the sky and you can see the things that when they say, when Republicans say make America great again, well, there was a time when in July of 1969 where a hell of a lot of us looked at a crappy signal from the moon in black and white and felt things were pretty great, and so maybe that's the moment that we do become great again. I don't know, and
we'll find out.
I'll say this: I would rather my money be going to something like Artemis and all of those trickle down things that they talked about. Bombs on somebody.
Let me say this. Somebody on the chat, the dialogue on the side said, "Why are we spending money on Artemis when we spend money on all the The thing is, we have the resources to do it all. We can do Artemis, and we can address energy. We can address global climate disruption. We can address the economy. We can do it all because we've done it before. This country mobilized to fight 2 wars at a time. And then when those wars were over, we had a Pacific War, we had a European war. And when those were over, we mobilized to restore the economy of Japan and Germany as well. We rebuilt Europe. This country can do it all. We have the resources, we have the intelligence. All we need is the commitment."
And that's absolutely a true statement. And that's why it always kills me when people say, and I see this, dude, why are we going to the moon when we should be taking care of veterans? Why are we letting immigrants in this country taking care of our own people? There's nothing preventing us from doing both, all right? And doing both, doing all of those things at once. We have more than enough capacity to do that. In fact, those are the things that we should be doing. We should have many tasks, many challenges, because America, by and large, our problems are the fact that we don't have enough to challenge us. So we spend all our time attacking each other. And as grown people throwing insults that would be an embarrassment to 14-year-olds on social media at each other, that is an indicator that Americans don't have enough to do. All right. And we can do this. We can take care of homeless people. We can provide health care for every goddamn person on this planet. We can go to the goddamn moon. We can take care of veterans. We can do all of these things, and we should be doing it. We should demand more of America, not less.
All right. On that note, I have my responsibilities here at the convention. I want to say to everybody who's watching, thank you all for checking in. It's just I love these conferences, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as Bob keeps holding them. And Jim, it is
Right.
always good to spend time with you. You
Right.
get to do the
You're
best.
coming out here and going to stay with me again here in a couple months, right?
Yeah, if Pensacon invites me, I'll be there. And I'm on their guest list. They just haven't done it officially yet. But I will. Yeah, I'm definitely ready to spend time with you again.
Absolutely. All right.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all.
David, thank you. Sell a lot of tribbles.
Actually, I'd rather sell a lot of books, but yeah.
Sell both.
All right. Those of you who you can find me on Facebook, and I also have a Patreon page. You can find me there. You can find Jim on Facebook. You can find Jim on Twitter, and you can find him. It's hard to get away from it. And he has a great website called Stone Kettle Station. So check that out too.
And you can find them both in B Cube Press's books on occasion, because these guys are great writers.
Oh, by the way, we did a charity auction yesterday, and I took one of those post-row alternative copies that you sent to me and put it in the charity auction, and that was the most spirited bidding we had all day on any item in the auction.
Awesome.
So those of you who are watching, Post-Row Alternatives, edited by Bob Brown. Pick up a copy.
And also, let's give that plug to Adam Troy Castro.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hugo-worthy story for that anthology.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to say good night now, or good morning.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Good night, guys. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Dave. And next week,
for us.
and we'll get there. So you take care.